Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne here on this Tuesday. College football and basketball, baseball, blitz. We're going to be talking with a lot of really smart people. John Hartwell, athletic director, University of Louisiana Monroe, our AD of council on retainer. Love having him on here. I get to talk to an AD and get inside the mind of what goes on. He's also on a lot of national committees with the NCAA. And maybe we can find out what's happening next with the portal, what's happening with NIL, what's happening with a possibility that Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football, and the media guides talked about last week on the show Thursday. Possible rule where they may stopping the clock on incomplete passes in college football games to speed the game up. They're doing whatever they can to try to speed the game up in the interest of TV viewers, because right now college football games are in many cases way too long, painfully long, with all of the reviews. You can pretty much book it on a touchdown. They're going to almost it seems like most of them there's going to be a review. And again, really trying to get Steve Shaw on the show, the head of NCAA officials. We had him on several times last spring in the off season. I know he's a busy man, but I really have a lot of questions because I get a lot of them from our listeners and viewers. So we'll get into that. But we'll be joined in the second segment by Doug Dean, AU Dose in Birmingham. Top of hour number 2, Joe Klein, Arkansas Razorback, 15-year NBA All-Star and Olympic gold medalist, the 1984 U.S. Olympic team in Los Angeles. Also one of the better color man analyst on ESPN's college basketball games, covers a lot of college basketball, and we'll get his take on where the game is now. What can we do to make it better? Got great athletes. We don't seem to have the basketball players, the guys who, court awareness, free throws, fundamentals. The game, you can pretty much watch one game. You're watching the same game over and over. They throw the ball, kick it in, kick it out, shoot the three. The 3-point shot has changed the game. I'm going to ask Joe, is it ruining the game? Is it taking basketball a place we don't want it to go? I'll ask that to John Hartwell too. He being a Citadel Bulldog basketball player himself back in his day. In the fourth segment, Jordan Hill checks in 24/7 Sports over in Athens, talking about all things Georgia. Not too soon to say the spring practice is just around the corner for the two-time defending national champions. And we also need to get our good friend Lauren Smith, the longtime sideline reporter, University of Georgia, now host of the 3.5-hour pregame Georgia football show on the radio. One of the best out there. And he's writing a book which should be ready for release this spring on Georgia's 21 national championship team. We talked with Lauren about the way things are going. You're going to be writing a second book. You're going to have to rough it out at St. Simon's or Sea Island or Hilton Head, where you hold up when you write these books. But I'm looking forward to reading it because, man, the detail, the stories, it's going to be worth it just to read about what goes into making a national champion. So we are here every Monday through Saturday, Sidelines, www.sidelines.live. If you miss us live, you can always hear us on radio stations like Sports FM 104.7, Sports Radio FM 104.7 in Cookeville, Tennessee, up on the Cumberland Plateau, and Kicks 96.3 in Alexander City, Lake Martin, Alabama, part of the Radio Alabama group of stations by Lee Perryman and the group over in Sylacauga. And 680thefan.com, the podcast park in Atlanta. Go there. Our website, www.sidelines.live. Watch it Also, consider becoming a sponsor on Patreon. We love doing this show. That allows us to take these trips to, SEC basketball tournament, SEC baseball tournament, SEC media days, travel to games and all. Love to have you as a supporter. Click that orange button. It is so easy. Even my father and Jethro Bodine have been able to successfully navigate it. And reminder, one of our new sponsors, rumbleboxinggym.com/Midtown Memphis, and Camp Lee. This is 3 of these gyms that she's going to open. This is gym number 1, Union and McLean, Midtown Memphis. They're going to be popping up around town, but this will be the first one. Expected opening date, the first week of April. You can join now at discounted rates. What's really cool is they'll have 25 weight benches with all the dumbbells, barbells, all the weight equipment in the middle, group training for 45-minute intense, grueling, hardcore workouts. And on the other side, 25 boxing punching bags. This is going to be great. You talk about engaging every muscle in your body, both sides of the brain. It is it. rumbleboxinggym.com/Midtown Memphis. Now let's get ready to rumble. As John Hartwell will be joining us here momentarily. And folks, we had a lot of fun yesterday on the show talking with Ben Troop and Glenn Rogers, combined 14 years of pro football experience between them. At Super Bowl, Chiefs and Philadelphia, a lot of people will tell you was a classic, one of the best Super Bowls that we've seen. And then you get that call that, yes, from a technical standpoint, that was interference where he inadvertently touched his jersey, and the Eagles player was accountable, took responsibility for it. That was a tough way to end it, but that was one of the better Super Bowls. We've had some really good Super Bowls lately. That one was really good. Patrick Mahomes and his club foot, whatever they shot him up with at halftime, I don't think he felt a thing. Kind of like when your hands and your feet and your fingers are just so cold or numb, you can bang them into a flagpole. You don't even feel it. That's how it felt. All right, John Hartwell's on with us right now. And John, college basketball right now. You're the new AD at ULM. You've got a lot on your plate, and I see the game growing in popularity. I see everybody loves it. Sports Center has made it where they search for the dunks and all. But as far as the game goes, is the 3-point shot, and I'm going to ask this to you as well as Joe Klein, who will be on with us later in the broadcast. Is the 3-point shot changed basketball, and is it taking it to a place where we don't want it to go? Because it seems like if you've seen one game, you've seen most of them every season lately.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely changed the game, but here's what I would say, and it's the same methodology for a shooter. A shooter can shoot you into a game or can shoot you out of a game. A maker is what you want. And there are all kinds of shooters out there. You want a maker on your team. But, with the 3-point opportunities, and some teams live and die by them. I mean, I'll give you an example. The number 1 3-point shooting team in the country right now is my former institution, Utah State. And they go to San Jose State Saturday night. San Jose State, Tim Miles, the head coach there, used to be the head coach of Colorado State and in Nebraska. They go to San Jose State and end up losing down the stretch because they just absolutely refuse to go inside. I mean, everything. So, you shoot all these 3-pointers, and it's, funny sometimes how coaches talk about discrepancies in free throws. Well, you know what? If you're standing out at the perimeter jacking 3-pointers all day, you're not going to shoot as many free throws. Those teams who can score in the lane are going to go to the free throw line more often. And in my mind, especially as you come down late February, early March in conference tournament play, and then ultimately an NCAA tournament. You may be able to win a game or two, living and dying by the perimeter. Look at St. Peter's last year in the NCAA tournament. They did it multiple times. But in the long run, you've got to have a balanced attack, and you've got to have the ability to score inside. And then when you start doing that, collapses the defense down, and you can kick it back out and get guys with wide open threes, because there's a much higher percentage of wide open threes made than there are contested threes.
Well, if you're shooting a lot of threes, you also have to be a really good rebounding team, don't you?
Yeah, you do. And those long threes, you make a great point there, because the long threes, the misses on those tend to be long rebounds too, and allowing your opposition to get out on the fast break, create an advantage numbers wise, and to score in transition.
Yeah. And that's what people were talking about with, like a guy like Oscar Sheboy at Kentucky. He may have 22 rebounds and 23 points in one game. We used to see 35 or 40 guys like that across the country in a typical college basketball season. Now there's 2 or 3. There's just not many of them. And the rebounds are coming a lot from the guards because of the fact that you're shooting threes and they're long, they're out on the perimeter. But I love college basketball. And I just, that was an interesting take. And when the foreign players come over here, they are so adept at free throw shooting, fundamentals, and skills, because they spend like at least one day a week in practice on nothing but fundamentals. John, got a question for you. From an AD's perspective, because we got a lot we're going to cover, and Doug Dean will be on here in the second segment with us as well from Birmingham. But from an AD's perspective, I saw where the SEC is going to distribute $49.9 million to each member school. I'm assuming that's from the 21-22 year, correct? Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, that's correct, and that's a combination of conference generated, multimedia rights, obviously, the deal with CBS, the deal with ESPN, corporate sponsors at the SEC level, not at the individual institution level, but at the conference level. So yeah, I mean, basically $50 million in the coffers of each institution, which, let's look at even the highest budget institutions. I think there are 3, maybe 4 SEC institutions now that are pushing $2 million. $200 million in revenues. So, in one fell swoop there, that's 50 or 25% of those budgets, and those lesser budgeted schools, because there's still, a handful that are down, roughly half of that, 100 million, that's close to half of their revenue distribution. Now, some of our listeners may say, well, gosh, why the huge discrepancies in budgets? And there are some, stadium size. You look at Ole Miss and Vanderbilt, stadium sizes for football are much smaller. So your ticket revenue in football is going to be smaller. But the other thing you got to look at is number of sports sponsored, because that plays into it too. And while nobody in the SEC is quite Stanford and plays, everything from football to tiddlywinks that the NCAA sponsors, but you do have some discrepancies in number of sports sponsored by individual institutions.
All right, John, because I want to talk some SEC, Sun Belt, all over the country here, but I want to ask you, what's the tax treatment? I'm fascinated. Your background in public accounting with E&Y, and I know that's a real weapon that you have. Not many ADs have the business acumen that you do. So let's say that $49.9 million comes to Arkansas, Tennessee, Ole Miss. They all get that check. Well, I'm sure it's wired in with the routing number and the account number. I mean, you tell me how this works. How is that treated? What's the tax treatment? I know this is a silly question, but you're going to, not know the ones you never ask. How is it treated tax-wise?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rob. And that's part of the debate back and forth I waited, about 12 minutes to say the words NIL, name, image, and likeness. But
Yes.
That's part of the debate about name, image, and likeness. Because right now, those dollars come in and they are not taxable at all to the institution or to the athletics department. Part of the great debate about NIL and what, ultimately is deemed by many as pay for play is, hey, all of a sudden, if student athletes who are not employees become employees, does that jeopardize the tax exempt status of, an individual institution or the SEC or any of those? So you do have, some concern there. Should they be deemed employees and all of a sudden college athletic departments become for-profit taxable entities as opposed to not-for-profit non-taxable entities?
Okay, so that 49.9 million is not taxed. Now, let's say you've got an NIL collective that's worth $25 million, and then you're paying that out to student athletes. That 25 million principal is one thing, but then distribution of income is yet another. Now we're about to go to a break. So what I want to do is tease the listeners, okay? Because these are questions that I'm getting. And I got this one from Levon Helm from Turkey Scratch, Arkansas, one of our listeners. And I don't know the answer to it, but I guarantee you our version of the CPA who makes Howard Sprague look disorganized, John Hartwell, the AD at ULM. Go Warhawks. Go Warhawks. We'll be right back to get that answer after this. All right, John, that is the question now. NIL, Watson your school, coast to coast, anywhere. You brought in all the money. Now it's being paid out. Who's going to be doing that? The controller at the university that works with the AD? In your case, ULM is lucky they have somebody that knows what is going on and knows how to, work this thing. But I'm curious about the tax treatment.
Yeah, great question once again. And here's the deal with the collectives and NIL. No NIL dollars can funnel through the university at all. They all have to be handled by a separate third party. Early NCAA guidance was that, hey, it's got to be a total standoff, separate. There can be no affiliation or relationship with the athletic department or an individual sport with the collective. They have come back now and said, well, there can be affiliation, but none of the money can funnel through the university. And again, now whether this is 100% being followed in practice, but as per policy or procedure as prescribed by the NCAA, it cannot be a recruiting enticement, if you will. It's got to be any of those deals have to be done after Jane Doe signs with XYZ University Volleyball, or John Doe signs with XYZ Men's Golf. Again, that is in policy. I'm not sure that that's totally in practice, but in terms of the taxability, so when John or Jane Doe receives an NIL deal, that the money that they receive is deemed as personal income to that individual. So there is, it's a taxable transaction. And, we've talked a little bit about NIL agents on here and why you see so many folks migrating to getting in the NIL game from an agent perspective, as opposed to those agents who represent coaches or NFL players. An agent that represents an NFL or a college coach or a professional player, normally in those deals, it's 4 or 5% of whatever the contract is for that coach or that professional athlete. In these NIL deals, it seems to be that the going rate is about 20%. So you're seeing a whole lot more people jump into the arena of being an NIL agent for a college student athlete. Now, as part of that, and again, I go back to, I'll use the term supposed to, as in return for that 20%, that agent is supposed to facilitate, tax withholdings, helping them with their contracts for NIL, all of those type things. Now, whether that's really happening or not across the board remains to be seen. On some of these larger agencies, I have no doubt it's being done, which is a much needed step, because you've got a lot of these young men and women who are signing NIL deals who have no idea about doing quarterly withholdings for taxes, or how to file, or how to do a contract for NIL. So it serves a good purpose there.
Yeah. Well, John, you and I both know those very, very popular dates for quarterly withholding: January 15th, April 15th, July 15th, and October 15th. I know them well, and I know you do too. I'm going to tell you what, when I come back, I want to be reincarnated as a rooster like Foghorn Leghorn, with a degree in mechanical engineering and a master's in accounting. That's what I want to be able to do. Because when you understand, you take a look at the Fortune 500 companies, over half of the CEOs have a CPA. And I always say this, that the people at University of Louisiana Monroe, having you as their AD, they have no idea what they've got. But look at your track record where you've been. You understand how to talk to people that have money. And we all know the number one radio station of wealthy people is WIIFM. What's in it for me? Let's talk about those conversations that you have. Okay, now, you're there in Monroe, right? University of Louisiana Monroe. School's been there a long time. You're meeting with a lot of people, but look, your wife's family's up in El Dorado, 83 miles away. That's where she's from. So and she knows people in that area. What are these conversations like right now, and what kind of questions are you getting from the school's traditional donor base? But more than anything, and I've been in sales since May of 91. I eat what I kill, commission. I understand. I'll take a call at 5 o'clock in the morning. That's a client, and I'm not going to answer it by going, hello. I'm going to go, hey, man, how you doing? I've been waiting on that call. So what are those calls like, and what are you targeting right now? Because you said something really, it was a harbinger of things to come a few weeks ago.
Really on two fronts, and you made the allusion to LSU, and they're in Monroe, there are a lot of folks who fly those purple and gold flags, and I know Frank Duffy is listening in somewhere, clapping and saying "Go Tigers," but part of the conversation is, hey, your first check may be to LSU. You may have an undergrad, a grad degree, whatever from there, but the economic health and development of whether it's city of Monroe, West Monroe, the Northeast Louisiana region, all of those things improve with a strong athletics program for our ULM Warhawks. And so that's part of the conversation. Hey, your first check may go to LSU, but listen, your second check, which may not have, as many zeros behind it as your one to LSU, hey, that check to us for Warhawk Athletics absolutely helps. And the other thing that I think is really important, and this is a very simple statement, but it holds true throughout college athletics. There is a clear correlation between investment in and success output. So it would be hypocritical of me as the athletics director, Dr. Barry as the president, anybody affiliated with Warhawk Athletics to say, hey, we want to have big time athletics without funding it. The term I like to use, and this may be my simple Southern version, you can't have a big time athletics department on a bake sale and car wash mentality. That equation does not equal. So that's part of the message, been very well received so far. Still on the honeymoon, but we'll plug away and feel very optimistic about the future of Warhawk Athletics.
Well, you've got to raise the bar and the expectations. I mean, Audrey always says, junk in, junk out, positive in, positive out. And I like Coach Dye's philosophy about standing in the backfield at practice with the quarterbacks. And he used to say in his book, In the Arena, and he said, I don't allow, and I did not allow my quarterbacks to ever have a negative thought enter their mind. And you know what it's like. Doug Dean's on with us right now from down in Birmingham, the AU Dose. And, you don't want to be around people that are negative. I don't like negative people. And they'll say, well, I'm just being a realist. Well, I learned this from my mentor in the bond business, Kent Gieselman, 32 years ago. Well, what they're really not saying is, I don't want to try. They're the same kind of people that, I could have sold some of those bonds if we had some more of them, and you go get 1 million more of them, and they're going, well, my guy said he'd wait till the next one. Look, losers find excuses to keep being losers. I love your mentality about Warhawk Athletics. You've come from Utah State. You've been at Troy. You've been at Ole Miss. You've been at Georgia State. By God, what they've done there in downtown Atlanta with Turner Field and all like that, and they've got a great business college. You got to find things outside of athletics too when you have those conversations with people, because I'm sure, John, you have conversations with people who give to Warhawk Athletics or they gave to Utah State Athletics, but they also give to academics. Now they're hitting me up for NIL. When does it stop? But I bet those are some fun ones. But let's get to a sensible man who we love being on here, a purveyor of all things intelligent and a great writer, Doug Dean. Let's let him wax poetically and eloquently, and we're ready to hear it.
How you doing, Doug?
Good morning, guys. Mr. Hartwell, you see what Rob does. He sets me up like that every time I come on. Sets the bar so high, pro, that I'm doomed to failure. Hey, I got to ask you, Rob, this Kent Gieselman, what a name. I bet y'all called him the Geese or something like that, right? The
Geese. The man had the greatest collection of hats in the history of the world, at least 1,000 hats. And he's evolved for life, by the way. 22 grandchildren, 5 kids. Great guy.
That's great. Well, and as you know, it's going to be a big summer at the Dean house because not one, but both of my twin daughters, John, are expecting, one in June, one in July. It's going to be like having twins all over. So, awesome. Rob, before I get into some stuff that might be fun for all three of us to rant about, and I came on the show right when you were in one of your classic rants, Rob, which I always enjoy, in moderation. So the great Elvin Bishop, who I'm a fan of, who's, I guess he's still around. He's getting longer in the teeth by his own admission. He's got a great song that I wanted to share a lyric from. The song is a little off the beaten path, but it's everybody's in the same boat. It's a blues feel like Elvin does a lot of, and it's my way of complimenting the fun that you create on this show, Rob, day in and day out with guests. And sometimes it's serious, but mostly fun and analytical. He says, "Enjoy yourself. It's later than you think." And later in the song, he talks about you've never seen a hearse with love on top. So, yeah. Love the fact that you work so hard to create content like this. And what I want to kick off a discussion of, and I expect that in his background and Rob, that you will both have opinions on this. But one of my takeaways from the Super Bowl is that I no longer know what a pass reception really is in football. I mean, they make up these terms. It's like splitting an atom. You, Devontae Smith, and I try to be fair to Alabama and their former players. But if Devontae Smith's catch going inside the red zone before the half is not a catch, then we're going to need new technology in real time to play football.
Yeah, Doug, you're breaking up a little bit, and I don't know if I heard you, but you're talking about what is a true catch. I'm totally with you. They're splitting atoms out there, the officials.
Yeah, the one thing I saw a commentary yesterday, and it was spot on. We talk about the advances in technology and how life is made simpler and everything. But as it relates to officiating, I think you're going to see the pendulum switch back a little bit. But before instant replay, before all these things, there were blown calls, but you could say, hey, that's the human error in it, just like the humans playing the game. But now with technology in there, and you've got judgment calls, even after reviewing with technology, really the gist of this conversation was, are we better off going back the way it was and eliminating instant replay, eliminating long delays in games, regardless of what the sport is, and just let the human error of officiating be part of the game? And that's a great topic up for debate, because I don't think we can unequivocally say that today officiating in games, again, regardless of the sport, is better than it was 25 years ago.
Yeah. Well, wouldn't it be cool, guys, if we had a TV show called Forensic Officiating, and we went back 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago and could break down great plays that looked close at the time and see what really happened? I bet the history of college football would be turned upside down overnight, Doug.
Yeah, and I like what John said. Look, when it was first emerging, that is the review technology, and now I've always been bothered by, in the SEC, they go to the command center in Birmingham because there's no transparency. We're not. It's not disclosed to fans who exactly on this command center review. I guess it's former referees or less active referees, but it doesn't feel better if you're like Rob. My dad taught me that just because you're paranoid does not mean they're not out to get you. And so we bring along this technology, and we're all, as fans, we're saying this will be great for that horrible call that cost Colorado a game or the extra fourth down. This will help us clean up the game, and there won't be a bad loss resulted from referees or from missing calls. But what, in fact, we've gotten, it doesn't look like normal football when I watch some of those reviews Sunday on the Super Bowl. By that, I mean, there was a Supreme Court justice, and they were whether painting, a nude painting, the line was pornography or not. And the justice said, I can't articulate it, but you know it when you see it. I know a catch when I see it. And not only that Devontae Smith catch that I think was a catch until they tortured it with a football move and the new terms they just manufactured, but also that start of third quarter, the receiver catches a ball, gets nailed, and it's a scoop and score. It looked like a catch to me, but they overturned it too. So I don't know. As fans, it's not only adding length of time to games, which is not helpful to the entertainment value, but it's also creating, doesn't look like normal football to most of us.
It doesn't. I mean, and it's also annoying. And you saw the interference call, just inadvertent. They hadn't called it, and all these football, gurus that really know what they're talking about said, watch it on NFL Network. The whole game they hadn't been calling pass interference, and right there at the end, it's almost like there's an agenda, and one way or another, it's going to be met. And look, yeah, technically, on that stage, they let them get away with a lot. It's the Super Bowl. I guess the last game of the year. It could be a lot of these guys' last game ever, and maybe neither team may never make back to the Super Bowl. The current team, it's hard. I mean, look at, we had Ben Troop and Glenn Rogers on the show yesterday. 14 years of pro football between them. They talked about Dan Marino. His first year, he got to the Super Bowl. He never got back. We'll talk more right after this.
Hey y'all, it's Ainsley from Hewlett & Dunn, just coming to let you know about our new collection of boots. It's going to be our dress boots. They're the Horsepower collection, and they're genuine exotic leathers and really comfortable. Comes in all different sizes and patterns, so come check them out.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, we are lucky that we have people that are there in the stand with us. Our spotters, one of our great friends of the show, Maury Gaston. Great content, Doug Dean, he says on him. But that was Associate Justice Potter Stewart who said that about I can't rightly define what it is or tell you what pornography is, but you'll know it when you see it. And I got to say to both of y'all, the officiating, it's frustrating. And I love it when we have Steve Shaw, coordinator of NCAA officials, on here, because I respect him and love what he does. And he's a busy man. But it just, you're right. Like the other one is, he must first make a football move. That's a new one. A football move. You're getting really technical. I mean, yeah, Barney, you can arrest people for jaywalking too, or making a U-turn. And then Gomer Pyle's going to come out there and go, citizens arrest, citizens arrest. Remember that one? I mean, talk about that, John. You can be by the book to an extent to where you go crazy.
Yeah, you like to say, I mean, whether it's officiating or anything else in life, and too often it let common sense rule, but a lot of times if you leave it to chance on that, it doesn't necessarily work. Hey, I want to go back to one point you made earlier, though, Rob, about guys who either never made it to the Super Bowl or got a chance earlier in their career. They had no idea how lucky they would be, or that would be their last time. But, and I know a lot of people complained about the end of the game, pass interference call and all that. But, let's talk briefly about the totally unselfish slide by Jerick McKinnon at the end of the game. Now, whether he was told that before he went into the game and took the run or whatever, but what a heads up play there to basically, run out most of the time that was left in the game. And again, who knows, it's the dream of anybody who's ever played the game of football to score a touchdown in the Super Bowl. And basically he gives up that dream to let his team win. You talk about clearly Patrick Mahomes was the MVP, but Jerick McKinnon, you can't talk enough about the heads up play that was, and how ultimately that play, kept the Eagles from getting probably 45 to 50 seconds to try to go down the field instead of just a handful of seconds.
Yeah. Doug?
I'm experiencing a little kind of breaking up on y'all's end. I don't know if it's this device or the studio, but we'll forge ahead anyway. Great point, John. And all last season in college football, from time to time, we talked about the importance of situational awareness and how that at times appeared not to be. If it was coached well, then the players were not.
Yeah. Doug, we're having a little technical issue there, but John, when you think about a player sliding down like that, that's discipline. It's also probably just as hard to try to get a player who intercepts a pass in the end zone not to try to run it out, because he could get knocked down at the 3-yard line and turn the ball right back over, taking a knee, unless you've got a clear path to take it back 100 yards. Doug, let's try it again.
Yeah, we'll try. Hear me clean? Great. I'm getting a lot of breakup on your audio, but we'll forge ahead anyway. So I wanted to pivot and ask, John is the perfect guest or co-host to talk about the following. I'm really, Mr. Hartwell, with what if you take the case of Auburn, and I think a similar model might exist at most big programs. For years and years, this self-sustaining financials of Tigers Unlimited Fund has served us well, probably some years more than others. And the driver on it is you got to play ball with that to get season tickets and get better season tickets. Well, along comes the new TV revenue, which, what is it? Probably close on $50 million for SEC school now. That's going to get to, most people believe, get to $100 million per SEC program when you add Texas and Oklahoma. So, and meanwhile, there's this urgency for NIL to be funded so you can be competitive. And do you agree with me, Mr. Hartwell, that we need some really smart people in the room at the big programs, including Auburn, to figure out what is the transition and the evolution and balance of TUF versus NIL so that we can run the program, but we can also have the talent to be competitive at a high level?
Yeah, I really do. And that's going to become more and more of a challenge, I think, over the next 3 to 5 years. And I do think you're probably going to see 20 to 30. At one time I said 25 to 30. It may not be that high of a number of programs who can truly sustain everything at the highest level. And that's, a multi-million-dollar, and a lot of schools are talking about they need, 10 million plus on an annual basis to fund their collectives properly. But to be able to put that kind of money, be able to put money into facility enhancements and additions, continue to fill the stands and their various venues with fans for the games, as well as to fund the operations. And that is a hefty nut, if you will, in terms of the total dollar amount in there. But I do think some not only current valuation and allocation of assets, but looking at the roadmap for the future. Because if you just put on blinders and say, hey, I'm going to take care of what I got today, at some point that's going to run off the rails. You're going to have to look at your program 3, 5, 10 years down the road, and hey, what does that look like, and how can I best solicit these funds from individuals? And that is the one thing we talked before you got on, Doug. I don't know if you were listening. We were talking a little bit about NIL parameters, but one thing that is allowed now is solicitation by the athletic director, or the coach, or any of the other folks affiliated with athletic programs to get people involved and engaged in the collective. And so it really is a Rubik's Cube that it's going to take the attention not just of one individual, but of quite a few to navigate that matrix going forward.
Doug, along those lines, what John said, how are you going to keep people engaged and continuing to give when a lot of schools are saying they got to have a minimum 10 million in their NIL collective to go forward.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real conundrum here. By the way, before I go further, I wanted to congratulate John on his new gig. And hey, if I'm you, Mr. Hartwell, my speech to the guys in football is, why not us? You only have to be one of the 12 best teams in the country a given year pretty soon. So that's a lot of fun. You're going to take that program to new heights.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited about the opportunity. And, I'm not going to lie to you. I know I'm going to have to say periodically, and Terry, it's just like every coach, no matter what you have, no matter what Nick Saban has or Hugh Freeze or anybody else has, Josh Heupel, there are always things that other coaches have or other programs have that you don't have. But, I do have to every once in a while, I've got in my vocabulary the phrase, Terry, you're not at Auburn anymore. So there are some parameters. We're working to get more resources, but right now we've got to be prudent and separate needs from wants as we improve.
Yeah, and Doug, I like this conversation because we're getting into the real dollars and all. And Doug, look at the budgets at places around the SEC, and John, school brings in $175 million in revenue. How much of that will they clear after paying the bills to fund 21 different sports, and they pay salaries out of that and all? Give me some realistic numbers that they can at the end of the year say, from that 175 million, or let's just use an easy figure, 100 million. How much of that goes into the bank, into a savings account? And that's pretty basic, because now savings accounts and CDs are paying a little bit more, but I'd like to hear a realistic number.
Hey, that's a great question, Rob. And here's the thing. And again, I go back to coaches' mentality. Coaches say, hey, we got to spend everything we've got budgeted or everything that we bring in on an annual basis, because if you have 10, 12, $15 million at the end of the year, you can't call up Greg Sankey at the SEC office and say, hey, we finished with the surplus. Can we trade $5 million, $10 million in for 2 extra wins? And so that's the mentality that a coach looks at it, says, hey, if we've got it, we need to spend it. And obviously that's not a prudent financial approach in your own household. And it's just one of those things that's a quirk in athletics. But I do think, when there's so many components that go into this, and you don't see it as highly publicized today as you did, say, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. But those institutions where their athletics department generates a profit and they're able to say, let's give $3 million this year to the library, or let's give it to another academic component on campus. Those are the campuses where you see harmony between athletics and the academic side of the house. And it's no coincidence that they have high levels of success as well.
Yeah. And I think too, people love to talk about, I know Texas and Texas A&M are two of those $200 million plus athletic programs. And I look at what they net, and it's usually 11, 12 million. So the revenues, that's what's brought in from all those sports, ticket sales, TV revenue, bowl games, whatever. That doesn't include athletics fundraising, does it?
Yeah, in most cases, it's an all-in number. In most cases, It does include athletics fundraising. And what a lot of schools do, if you see that $10 or $12 million left over, and it's different. Every campus has its own set of different circumstances. But in a lot of cases, those schools that have those large excess of what you would call in private business net income, they'll sock that away to use for future capital projects. So that, which is a really prudent way of doing business, because if you clip along, let's say 6 or 7 years at a $12 million surplus, and you've all of a sudden got a nest egg of $80, $85 million, then you can go do a capital project without having to do a bond issue or things like that. So, some institutions do that. But again, there are different nuances and quirks on every campus, how those schools end up with that surplus. Hey, I'll put a plug here. If anybody's out there listening from one of those institutions and you've got money you don't know what to do with, hey, I can send it. You can send it to Warhawk Way, and we'll figure out a way to use it in ULM athletics.
Yeah, I mean, there are people that don't know what to do. There are people that don't know what to do with money, believe me, and they'll talk about charities and causes, athletic departments. Hey, you can even put, I'm sure, on a 706 and a state tax return, you could make a specific gift to an athletic department, couldn't you? Is that correct, John?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Doug Dean, let's try this again. As they say in the country, we got a blue jay on the line or something here this morning. It could be a balloon. It could be an unidentified flying object that's jamming the internet signal. I don't know what it is, but let's give it another whirl. Doug, are you there? Yeah. Doug, can you hear us? Okay. Doug, we'll tell you what we'll do. We'll just try again, get you back on tomorrow. I don't know what happened, but John, I love having you and Doug on here together. We're just having technical issues here. Sometimes this is going to happen doing live shows, but I think that a lot of people, and I get a lot of questions during the show and what have you, about all this money that comes in. There's, you have bond issues and all. Do most athletic departments in the country prefer to go the public debt route and just issue revenue bonds? Obviously, if it's a stadium, it's going to be a revenue bond, and the money to pay the interest on those bonds to the debt holders. You're selling debt when you sell bonds. I've sold lots of them over the years. That's where the revenue coming from ticket sales and all like that. And if your football program or basketball program is not successful, you got to find the revenue from somewhere else, but they find a way to do it. What do you think it is?
Yeah, the revenue bonds are still a pretty mainstream way of financing capital projects for athletics. Another concept that has gained some momentum here over the last 3 to 5 years, and I think you're going to continue to see more folks looking at doing this, are joint partnerships, a lot of times three-pronged, between state and local government, the institution, the university or athletics department, and private investors. And you've seen this done in some facilities projects that may have an arena that's surrounded with private housing, and also some retail there. And again, when you've got a three-pronged approach like that, the institution or the athletics department doesn't have to bite off as big a piece of the debt to service.
Okay, I got it, because debt service is, as you know, with your business background, is a big deal. Look, we're going to get Doug Dean back on with us tomorrow or Thursday if he can, because love having him on here. We just had some technical issues today. John, we've got about a minute left before we go to the break, and I know you've got to get off. Tell people how they can follow you, support you, and what you're doing at ULM. And I know you'll be back on with us Thursday. Love this discussion. We get answers from the answer man, John Hartwell.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at John_Hartwell. You can follow our progress, ULMWarhawks.com. I'll give you an example, and I had some Twitter back and forth last night. This is the power of college athletics, really, to me. A young man named Cam Haney, who is GA for the defensive backs at Murray State University. He was a student athlete at Utah State. I can remember the day he stepped on campus, a young man from Compton, California, who came to Utah State, had a strong mom who said,
John,
hey.
hold that thought. Hold that. We're going to come right back. We'll let you finish. Okay, John, I know you got a few seconds before you go finish that story because it's a good one.
Yeah, was just talking about Cam Haney, who's a GA at Murray State. And I can remember when he was a freshman student athlete, Utah State, came to Logan from Compton, California. His mom was very insistent on his academic progress. Spent some time, significant time with him over his career at Utah State. And now you see him making a difference in young people's lives at Murray State. That is the cycle and the power of college athletics and how you pay it forward. And fortunately, I've been able to do that from my time as a student athlete to years as an administrator. And when you see those next generations of that, despite all the crazy things you see happening in our world, you know that we're going to be in sound position because of young people instilling values learned in athletics in the next generation.
Hey, the don't get up after getting knocked down generation ain't going to make it. The get back up after getting knocked on your rear end will make it. And so will people like you with accounting degrees. You make sense out of the unsensible. I love this conversation. John, we'll talk later today. Have a great day. Look forward to having you back on Thursday morning.
Thanks so much. Y'all have a great day.
All right. Go Warhawks. All right. We're going to be joined in just a minute by Joe Klein. And we'll try to get Doug Dean back on with us tomorrow from down in Birmingham because love having him on. He's got a lot that he brings every single, segment when he's on. The more he's on, the better he is. I think the takeaway from that conversation with John Hartwell, AD at University of Louisiana Monroe, is you've got to know what you're doing. And you've also got to know how to ask people to give to your school, whether it's for academics, for traditional athletic fundraising, or now with the NIL. In NIL, there can't be any commingling of funds with the university. That the fundraising part is separate from NIL. Now, I've heard talk that some places around the country may fold all that, traditional athletics fundraising and NIL into one business or one building per se, house it under one roof. That'll be interesting to see how that works out. But if you look around the country at the schools that were out there in the open, just bragging about NIL, Texas A&M and Miami last year, or at least it was assumed that they were, but they were, Miami especially, it did not help their football program at all. In spite of A&M having what was ranked at the time, the number one recruiting class in the country was 7 5-stars. Keep in mind, there were only 33 5-stars in America last year. 7 of them went to A&M. How'd that work out? 5 and 7. Again, give credit Appalachian State. They beat what was ranked at the time, horribly overranked, number 6 Texas A&M. They beat them 17-10 in College Station. That was the canary in the coal mine right there, that you had a locker room filled with guys that were just, ringers, hired, to come there to A&M. I'm not sure they really cared about A&M or bought into the culture. And they got there and they didn't get all the money they were thinking they were going to get. They had to earn it, a novel concept, but it blew up in their face. It blew up at Miami. And Miami and the Rashada, the quarterback thing, and then it went to Florida. And now from supposedly getting 9 and then 13.6 million, he goes to Arizona State, and I'm thinking he's got a deal worth maybe $300,000. People, flush out your headgear and listen. These NIL deals, there's some of them that are big, but there's so few of them that are big, you probably know about them. You get it? They're not commonplace. If you went out there and took a survey of the 85 players on each of the 131 Division I football rosters, it is a small, I'm willing to speculate. I'm taking a swag here. It's single-digit % that have NIL deals. And the mega deals, it's really, really not that many people. That's just how this stuff works. And again, I'm a capitalist. I'm all about the free market, but also if you have children and you had $50 million and you were doing some estate planning, let's say you had 5 kids, say you wanted to give each of them $10 million. Would you want to give them their $10 million that's in a trust when they're 18 or 21? Heck no. No way. Absolutely not. Well, it goes against everything that you believe in, probably. Probably is a terrible word, but it is. It's against everything because you're killing their incentive if you dump that kind of money, $10 million in an 18 or 19-year-old's lap. That's why you put it in a trust. If we're going to have NIL, the only way it's going to be managed is if you put that money in an age-banded or an incentive-based trust. I think that's how it would work best. But I really love talking about the games, and you're seeing it right now. Somebody explained to me about Kentucky. Kentucky basketball has a lot of talent. I bet you they have more players on the roster with big NIL deals. I'm talking Kentucky basketball. I bet they have more guys with big NIL deals than about any school in America, certainly more than anybody in the Southeastern Conference. And it's not helping them. I mean, Kentucky, they lost to Georgia Saturday. They got beat by Arkansas last week, 88-73. Arkansas is a good team. Arkansas is getting better. I think what people need to be paying attention to is follow the money trail. And you look, and I want to talk with Joe Klein in a minute because he has 15 years experience as an NBA player. Look at the total amount of money that Michael Jordan made in his NBA career versus what someone like Kevin Durant or LeBron James or Steph Curry is making in his career. I mean, it really doesn't compare. So what I want to do, let's bring on Joe Klein. And Joe Klein, Slater Joe, I love you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Sidelines on the Tuesday. College football, basketball, baseball. We just had John Hartwell, our friend who played collegiately at the Citadel basketball and now new AD at ULM. But, man, I was just thinking about it. You played in the NBA 15 years, and you and I are the same age. I remember when you played college basketball, when you transferred from Notre Dame back to Arkansas. And, of course, you're from Slater, Missouri, but you made 15 years in the NBA, gold medal with the U.S. Olympic team in 1984. How many hours a day growing up alone did you spend just on fundamentals and with your coach in high school, free throws, defense, just repetition versus what you see the basketball players in today's college teams do?
Well, thank you all first for having me. Sorry I'm late. It was different back then. There wasn't as much structure. There wasn't any AAU. I'll tell you a funny story. I remember I was in high school and going into my senior year, and my coach comes down there and goes, "Hey, there's a guy out of Kansas City, AAU coach, coming, wants to talk to you." And back then, AAU was track and field.
Yeah.
I remember looking at him and going, "What in the heck does a track and field coach want to talk to me about?" He goes,
"Oh, wow."
He's like, "No, you moron. It's basketball. It's an AAU." And that was my first, I didn't know that stuff existed. And so there wasn't a lot of trainers and gym. I mean, I never played inside during the summer ever until, we didn't get on the hardwood until basketball season. Probably that summer was the first time I played indoors during the summer, ever. We were always outside on the blacktop, and you were playing with older guys, and you would play for hours and hours and hours because, there wasn't anything else to do. And
yeah.
And you would get out there, and there'd be 30 guys out there, and, winners stayed on. So, the games got very intense. And if you were out there jacking around and cost your team a chance to win, guys would get really upset, And then I think like with, you just learn, I learned by playing against older guys. I was out there, I was 13, 14 years old, only white kid on the floor on the asphalt playing against guys that were 28, 29 who were all state and all this. And so there were days I would absolutely get humiliated. And you can imagine the talk, the trash talk that was.
Yeah.
You either stepped up or you stepped off. And, fortunately I was, had a lot of, fortitude and kept working and kept coming back, and you would work on things because you were getting humiliated. You'd work on a turnaround jump shot or whatever, or your ball handling or whatever it might be, so that you could play. And so again, I think we would play games like 21 when we didn't have enough to where, you'd make a bat, you'd be like 1 against 4. If you made a basket, you had to shoot free throws, so you were working on stuff, but you were working on it much differently than how they do it today.
Yeah. And I just remember, guys, you remember in the early 80s, the memory is just in my brain. 1980, Darnell Valentine, great shooting guard from Kansas. And the teams, when you were with Eddie Sutton at Arkansas, I mean, these are great basketball minds. And I remember you would have a game in the early 80s. I think Virginia was number 1 in the country. Notre Dame beat them 52-51.
Yep.
I remember Ralph Sampson when my sisters were in school up in Virginia at Hollins, and a lot of their friends were at W&L and UVA, and I could listen on an AM radio. I still have that little transistor radio to the Virginia games on a station out of Virginia. Ralph Sampson was 7'4", but man, and you played the way y'all played back then. It was there was nothing. I mean, I'm not saying it just because we're the same age, but you just didn't get any better. It's like those Dean Martin roast on Friday night, man. I watched it at my grandmother's. It's just classic.
Well, I think the thing that you had back then, you didn't have a shot clock, you didn't have a 3-point line, and so you would get contrasts. I think the contrast in styles from team to team, nowadays, and I'm not saying, I mean, everybody doesn't play the same, but everybody plays similar. A lot of pick and roll and things. Whereas, you could, like when we played Virginia, we put a zone on them and they had to work the ball, and they had Ricky Stokes, Othell Wilson, Jeff Lamp, they had all
Lee
those.
Raker.
Lee Rake, and then they had, so they had to work the ball, and then we'd have to work the ball. So, I mean, granted, some of it was not as exciting, not as up and down, but the difference is when I was at Arkansas, when we tried to play 5 Slam and Jamma, we wanted to slow it down a little bit. They wanted to speed it up. So there was kind of who's going to inflict their will on the other guy. And so there were a lot of, and I had somebody show me a few years ago, and I don't know that how, people can kind of sometimes show you what they want to see, but they were showing me that, 20 or, before the shot clock, or that shooting percentages were higher, scoring was the same, and it kind of makes sense because with the shot clock, you get to a point where you got to take a shot, and that's not always a good shot, as we see. And so you see guys shooting lower percentages, lower, higher attempts, but a lot of it has to do with the shot clock and where you're at, and teams do a good job nowadays of trying to keep you to get from getting into your system, and then trying to force you to make low shot clock decisions. And if you don't have a stud that can go get you one, you see some of these teams that really struggle to score because get the wrong guy with the ball in his hand with the shot clock going down, and it's not going to work out for you.
Yeah, it's not. And you're doing more and more. You do a great job on ESPN, and you got a great, your basketball knowledge, experience, and all. Very few people have that. How many times do you see on a given Tuesday night, Wednesday, Saturday, shot clock violations now. And is that poor offensive planning, or is that just great defense, or a combination of both?
I don't think you see a lot of I don't think you see a lot of shot clock violations, but they are shot clock violations because of the type of shot they get. So
Okay.
it's not they don't stop the game, but mission accomplished if you're the defensive team, because you force a really bad shot at the end of the clock. So you see a lot of that. I mean, you really do. I mean, you see more of it than you would think. And so and I think a lot of it is defenses. Now you'll see teams maybe throw a little token pressure in the backcourt just to eat clock. So now you can't come down and get into your clock situation quickly as you'd like, and now it forces you to start your offense with 15 seconds instead of 22 seconds. And so, I think a lot of it is very good coaching. I think coaches do a really good job defensively of forcing that situation.
In the last year, and I want to talk about Arkansas, I want to talk about all the SEC schools, but I think about the 5-star rankings. Last year, Jabari Smith comes into Auburn, whose father played at LSU, played in the NBA. He comes in as a 5-star. He sure is a lot different than Johan Traore, who came to Auburn as a 5-star. Is that just the difference in starting out young, doing all the little things, and getting more and more coaching from an early age? Is it that alone?
I think a lot of it is genetics. I mean, and Jabari had as good a stroke as you could see, and at 6'10", so you see those two things right there, and you're like, holy smokes. And so, as you know, the NBA is so, and college is so 3-point oriented, that those two things are premiums that people covet and people really want. And so you take a guy that can really, really shoot it, put him in a 6'10" frame, and you're going to have some people salivating over him.
Yeah. Hold those thoughts, because I want to get into this. I love your take on it. Joe Klein is with us, ESPN, 15 years in the NBA. We're going to hear from the man right after this.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
I'm going to say something about one of our new sponsors, rumbleboxinggym.com/Midtown Memphis. And Camp Lee will open the first of her 3 gyms in Memphis, late March or first week of April. Here's the laydown. You've got 25 weight benches on one side of the gym with all the weight equipment. In the middle, group training, 45-minute intense workouts. They're going to be a lot of fun. And on the right, 25 punching bags. It is going to be the rage. You can join right now, rumbleboxinggym.com/Midtown Memphis. Discounted rates are available now. Group training, it is going to be a lot of fun. Engage both sides of your brain, work every muscle in your body with a lot of like-minded warriors who like getting in great shape. Joe Klein, you working with ESPN, and we're all junkies to it. You can't watch enough basketball. Let's get your take first off with Arkansas. Eric Musselman, he is it's incredible job he's done there twice in his first 3 years. The Hogs have made it to the Elite Eight. They were the only team left from the SEC standing last year. They'd won 5 in a row, lost disappointing at home, but Mississippi State's playing some pretty good basketball, went on the road, scored 70. Where do you see Arkansas finishing out this season, even with Nick Smith Jr. coming into play? And I don't know how much that helps or whatever at this point in the season, but you know better than anybody.
Yeah, I mean, as we'd all know right now, it's Alabama and everybody else. So I think you got a group of 6 teams after Alabama, that you're going to see them win road games that you didn't think they could win, lose home games that you thought they would win. It's going to be a real rock fight coming down the stretch. But Coach Musselman does a great job every year. His teams usually build. I think the thing that's different this year is, he doesn't have his complete roster. The last 2 years he was building what he wanted to do with a healthy roster. This year he had two guys that were going to play 30 minutes plus for him every night. That in Brazil and Nick that haven't been there, so he's been building it and. They're doing a good job, and Nick's coming back. I think they're going to continue to build. I think also the difference is that the past years he might have had one freshman really being in the mix. Now he's got 3 that are in the mix, and they're great freshmen, and they're doing a heck of a job, but they're still freshmen. They don't know what they don't know, and so they're getting into. It's like running into Mississippi State the other night. You beat Kentucky on the road, and you're like, we're at home. We're playing this Mississippi State team. Well, I've had Mississippi State 3 times, and I told everybody in Arkansas, some dudes are coming into your house. They're gonna try to take the bread and milk right out of your refrigerator. This is a nasty bunch of bulldogs that are playing tremendous defense and playing well together. And they're gonna fight anybody to the death for a game. You're not blowing these guys out, and they had trouble closing it. They kept the game close, so I think you're gonna see a lot of that kind of stuff coming down the stretch. Is that Arkansas is going to A&M tomorrow night. And everybody's kind of sitting there going, well, A&M's on a roll. I could see Arkansas winning that game. I mean, very easily. I think you're going to have a lot of 50-50 games down the stretch, and I think Arkansas will finish right at 500, maybe more, maybe a little less, but I think that's going to get them with everybody else kind of being mediocre in that, not mediocre, but in that same general area. I think they'll have a chance to do something in the tournament, and then after that, get into the NCAA tournament, and who knows, get a good draw and win a couple close games, and you're right back where you started.
Yeah, and that's interesting the way you took it apart. He usually has one freshman that's doing something. Now he's counting on 3. And from your great college career what it was like. Talk about that, being a rookie in the NBA, even with all your talent. How much of a learning curve was that?
Well, usually when you come out of college, you're the biggest, baddest dude. And then you go to the NBA, and it's like, get to the end of the line, Junior. And so, and you're not the biggest, baddest dude. You're not the tallest dude. You're not the most athletic dude. You're not the strongest dude. Everybody is close, and everybody's good. And then you have the guys that are superstars that are you can't believe what you're watching. So, I mean, you gotta find your niche. Everybody wants to be that guy, that superstar, but not everybody can be. So you got to find your niche. You got to find how to fit in, how to play, how to get on the floor, and so you can be a part of something. And some people can do it, and some people can't. And it's a very difficult thing to. I was in college 5 years, so I was 22, 23 years old. I can't imagine trying to filter through all that at 17, 18, 19 years old. I mean, I don't think I could do it.
Yeah. Who are the best teams that you've seen this year in person when you've been calling a game for ESPN, because you've done a lot of games, and they need to be putting you out more and more. And I don't know if Dick Vitale will ever retire, but I do think that I love watching Bill Walton. Some people, he talks about a lot of other stuff, but you've got a really high basketball IQ. That term's overused, that phrase a lot, but I love seeing you do the games. I guess it's just we've been watching you for a long time, and I got a lot of Arkansas friends. By the way, Wes Moore, ESPN 103.7, The Buzz, was on with us yesterday, and he said he took recently A&M to win the SEC in basketball, and I think his odds he got were 3,000 to 1. I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But they're 10-2, and Alabama's 12-0. But anyway, I had to throw that in because we love him being on here with us. But what do you think? The best teams you've seen in person?
Well, I'm going to do Alabama, Georgia Saturday, and I haven't done Alabama yet, but I'm going to go ahead already and tell you it's Alabama.
I like that. A harbinger of things to come. What was the canary in the coal mine? The 12-0 record.
Yeah. But I like A&M. I mean, I've had them a couple times, and I like. He's got a good grip on that team. They're playing together. I tell you, another team that's sneaking up there, and we got them tonight, is Vanderbilt. I mean, they're starting to kind of gel, and they can really score. And the big kid Robbins is good with Studi, and they've got a nice mix going on there. And they're starting to put it together. But I would probably say A&M of teams that I've seen. I think they play really good together. They got a nice mix with Radford and Colton. They got some bigs, they got some shooters, and he's kind of found his. I think they struggled in the offseason because he was trying to find his 8 guys. Well, I think right around Christmas he found his group, and that's when they really took off.
I watched Jerry Stackhouse when he was on the staff with the Grizzlies. I love going to the Grizzlies games. Typically about 25 a year over the years. I like him. I remember him when he played at North Carolina.
Good coach.
Yeah, he is. When you look too at the jobs, I mean, Mike White goes from Florida, where he just, sometimes you just run your course and it's time for a change of scenery. And Georgia got the win. It's not a great Kentucky team, but it's still a Kentucky team. It's like killing a 14-point buck. It's still a 14-point buck. Everybody wants to beat Kentucky, and that's the game that can sometimes you get so excited about winning it, it can hurt you for a few games. But Mike White's first year, what kind of report card you give him?
Tremendous. He took a team that had no interest in playing defense whatsoever. None.
Yeah.
You got 40 on them. Okay. I mean, they were pathetic defensively, and he's made them formidable. They play defense, and he's really kind of got, then he got Terry Roberts, and Terry Roberts is a dynamic player, a difference maker, and he's kind of built it around him and Aquendo, and but they're playing some D. I mean, they're not the greatest defensive team in the league by far, but if you compare what they're doing this year to last year, I mean, it's night and day. I mean, they give some resistance. Last year there was no resistance. Everybody walked in there and shot 50% from the 3 and 60% from the floor, and I mean, it was a joke. And so he's made them. You better be ready. You better be ready to play. You better be ready to play. If you're gonna roll in there and just go through the motions, you're gonna walk out there with an L.
Yeah, and then on the other end of the extreme, LSU starts off. They get that win the night of the Liberty Bowl. I was at the Arkansas-Kansas game in Memphis, packed house at the Liberty Bowl. Arkansas lost that game, and LSU has lost 11 straight since then. We know about Will Wade, what happened. We have Coach John Brady on with us a lot, who's the color analyst for LSU. Bottom line, he made a good point last week. You flipped almost an entire roster, and it's terrible. He goes, it may happen again this year. You see it that way? Because that's and like you said, you don't want to have to do that.
Yeah, it's just the world we're in now, though. I mean, last year he had to bring in 12 new guys. And a lot of teams are having to do that. And a lot of times you don't have time to research. It's not like you've been recruiting these guys for 3 or 4 years and following them. So you're going to hit and miss. And, I liked this team early. I thought he had a good mix. I thought they could be, be a decent SEC team. And then they've really struggled with their guard play. They've really had a hard time scoring points. And then it just snowballs. It starts to snowball, and you lose confidence, and you lose that pep in your step. And so, certainly he's going to look at that roster, and he's losing some key pieces, but he's going to look at that roster and he's going to say, we got to get better and everywhere. And so, unfortunately that whole thing could happen again this year. And now, I'm glad I'm not a coach. That's all I got to say. It's just, you start thinking about it. Your probably toughest days as a coach is the day your season ends. It used to be you kind of had a reprieve and hey, let's go recruit. But now the next 8 weeks after your season ends, whenever it ends, it's probably the most stressful time you have as a coach, because you don't know who's coming, who's going, who you can get, who you can't get. It's the wild, wild west.
Yeah, it really is. I know you've got a call with, and you've got a game you've got to cover tonight. You're going to be on ESPN tonight, correct?
That's a great question. I think it's SEC Network. I think it's South Carolina and Vanderbilt. I believe SEC Network.
Yeah, SEC, same thing. Yes, SEC Network. Well, look, we'll be watching. I want to say first up, thanks so much for taking time, and want to get you back on in the next week or two, because, God, basketball. You've forgotten more than collective Western civilization probably knows. But how do people follow you and go to your Corky's barbecue restaurant when they're in Little Rock? Where do they find it?
We got one in West Little Rock off West Haven Drive right there by the Best Buy. Got one in North Little Rock right off McCain Boulevard. Just, it's easy to find. Corky's Little Rock on Twitter, and even I can find it, So it's pretty easy to find. But we've been there 26 years. So, very fortunate, very, very lucky to have it. But got some great people working for me. Got great food, great prices. Just, give us a call, come in, drive through. We got you.
Hey, the two of the best things on that menu are the hot chicken and the catfish bites. That stuff, they're as good. They're like the fried oysters of, they're that good. I'm Joe, thank you so much. And Mike Mata, Michael Jordan, and all of our friends over in Fayetteville and Little Rock, a lot of people love you. And Tommy Christianberry, hey, glad to have you. Thanks so much.
All right, anytime. Appreciate it, guys. Have a great day.
You do too. Thank you. That is Big Joe Klein, man. I tell you what, I love it. Talking with him, talking college basketball, his insight on where the game is, where it has been, and where we think it's going. But I also think a great takeaway from that conversation about Mike White. He took a team that just really wasn't no interest, as he said, in playing defense. And you get those guys to start playing defense. Now you've got 5 conference wins. And last year, Georgia was 1-17. I'd give all my guys a T-shirt that says, I don't need your attitude. I've got my own, and yours sucks. Because if you're okay with losing, and that's the norm for you, I suggest you find other people to hang around that'll get your head right. And that's what you got to do. But hey, looking forward to watching that South Carolina Vanderbilt tonight, SEC Network. I know Joe had to get on with Coach Jerry Stackhouse, and Jerry Stackhouse, played at North Carolina, NBA, on the Memphis Grizzlies staff when he took over after Bryce Drew. I just couldn't believe that didn't work. I think we all thought he would be really successful with his brother at Baylor and his dad, a coach from up at Valparaiso in Indiana. One of these basketball kids that grew up on the basketball court. But I think Jerry Stackhouse is slowly, steadily building a solid basketball foundation. And keep in mind, Bryce Drew, when he was coaching at Vanderbilt, they had their first ever losing season at Memorial Gymnasium in Vanderbilt. And that is the social thing to do in Nashville, is to attend Vanderbilt basketball games with their weird court where the benches are on the opposite ends. Why do they do that? I don't know. I'm going to ask somebody. We're trying to get Roy Kramer, former commissioner of the SEC, on the show. Commissioner, love to have him on. Still sharp as a tack. Saw him on Paul Feinbaum's show a couple of weeks ago. Maybe he knows. Maybe it's been there for a long time. But Vanderbilt basketball, that's typically a really hard place to play. They got the win over Tennessee last week, a buzzer beater. Tennessee lost again to Missouri at the buzzer last week. They lost to Florida on the road, 57-44 or 67-54 in Gainesville. I don't know what's going on with Tennessee. They're good, but they're 8-4 in the league. Auburn's 7-5. Texas A&M sitting there at 10-2. But Alabama stands alone at the top, and they're going to win the SEC. I don't think there's any question about it. They're the best team that I've seen in the conference. But Georgia, like Joe Klein just said, the job, Mike White right now is my SEC Coach of the Year. And I'm not saying that because in the shadows is our good friend Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports Georgia. But when we come back, we're going to talk some Georgia basketball, football, all dog things after this. All right, Rob Browne back with Jordan Hill. And Jordan talking about the dogs. Joe Klein was just on with us, and he'll be doing the game tonight, South Carolina, Vanderbilt on SEC Network. And, of course, I remember Joe back in his college days transferred from Notre Dame, from out of Slater, Missouri, back to Arkansas. And now he's in Little Rock, but does a lot of games for ESPN. And we talked about great coaching jobs and whatever. And I mentioned Mike White, his first year at Georgia. And again, he took a team, as Joe Klein said, that had absolutely zero interest in playing defense. And that alone has propelled the Dogs to, I believe, is it 5 SEC victories now?
Yeah, they are 5-7, and this is a team that won one SEC game all of last season. Yeah, I think, it's one of those things that's funny around the Georgia fan base. I think people got their hopes up really, really high when they beat Auburn to start SEC play, and Georgia did kind of fall back to earth after a pretty good start. I think they started 3-1 in SEC play and had a rough stretch. But they beat Kentucky on Saturday. They earned that win. They outplayed Kentucky, withstood some really big scoring runs from Kentucky to get that job done. So, a lot of people are hopeful. Could they still sneak in the tournament? They don't have the resume. I don't think that's happening. Now, the NIT could happen. And even if that's what happens, how things play out, what an outstanding first year by Mike White and this crew. I mean, this team went 6-22, I believe, last season. It was an utter disaster. They walked into a situation where there just wasn't a ton of talent on this team, and they did a good job of revamping it, getting ready for year one. Hasn't been perfect, but I've been very, very impressed with the job. The coaches and also got to give a lot of credit to these players for the efforts they put in.
Well, we ask this question a lot because there is so much talent just in the greater Atlanta 6.5 million people area. And are you seeing where Mike White is making inroads? We know about AAU, but there's just so darn many schools that play really good basketball in that area alone. And schools like Auburn and Alabama come in there, not to mention other schools from the ACC. And then you got Georgia Tech right there. But with Josh Pastner, I think they got a basketball lobotomy at Georgia Tech. I don't know what happened, but it's bad. But Mike White, and I know a lot of people at Ole Miss that really like this guy. They all like this guy can coach, no doubt about it. But what are you hearing on the recruiting trail for Georgia basketball?
Well, they made the most of Saturday's win against Kentucky. They had 11 recruits that were on hand, and let's see, a 5-star, several 4 stars, some 3 stars. And what I've gotten the feel for how they want to recruit is that Mike White is not live or die, got to get guys in Georgia. That got brought up a ton, as I think it was fair to do when he was hired. And the thing he's emphasized from that point forward is, we want the guys that are right for Georgia. If they're in the state, great, and we're going to recruit the state hard. But, we're not afraid to look outside of Georgia to get these guys. And it's going to be fascinating because to me, this is what's going to determine if in the long run, this tenure is going to be successful, is how he recruits. And again, not just the state of Georgia, but you have so many talented guys here that I think a lot of them are interested in coming to Georgia. A lot of those guys grew up, and maybe not diehard Georgia fans, but I think the opportunity to go right down the road is going to be very appealing to guys. And what I'm really fascinated with is what this coming off season looks like, more so with the portal, because Georgia did a good job in his first year of getting some in-state guys that had gone elsewhere.
Yeah.
Mardrez McBride, that was at North Texas. I believe he's from Augusta. Also Frank Anselm, who was at Syracuse, he spent some time in the state of Georgia. They did a good job of getting guys that were somewhat familiar with the state of Georgia and saying, look, here's an opportunity to come in. You can probably play a good bit and, really help us compete. And now if you go into the portal this offseason, you can show people, maybe there's people that are a little homesick or guys that want to go back closer to home, and you can show them proof of concept and say, look, first year, we're trying to prove ourselves. We did a very good job, competitive, probably going to end up right around 500, which I think is a very, very successful first year. Why don't you come back a little closer to home and help us try to compete with the Alabamas, the Auburns, the Kentuckys, the Tennessees of the SEC?
Yeah, and I just think about Georgia basketball. How important is it that Mike White appeals to the fan base to get there early, be loud, and also start talking about what are we going to do to Stegman Coliseum? We're going to just keep adding or talking about a new arena. Georgia, land-wise, is locked between the Oconee River and the railroad track, but they could build it anywhere. I'm curious, do the Georgia boosters are they like look what happened at Auburn? You were at Auburn for a while. I was there when Sonny Smith was coaching. I saw Cliff Ellis, and there have been some great runs. It's consistency. Georgia has been to the Final Four. Not many schools can say that in the SEC, not named Kentucky, Arkansas, Florida, LSU, and Auburn, and Mississippi State. But how close is Mike White to getting the big-time support? I'm not saying he's going to get what football gets, but I think there's a lot in the tank at Georgia.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's sort of like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. I think he's shown enough progress to this point that he can show people and say, look, we want to do this, we want to do that. And I'm not expecting any kind of grand renovations or a new arena, anything like that. But they are already making tweaks, getting ready for the second season. They're going to move the students to sort of the side, sort of like how Neville Arena, where they have the student section, to try to get them more involved. I thought they did a really smart thing. What they're going to do in next season for Georgia is swap the benches. So during the second half, the opposing team is going to be shooting those free throws in front of Georgia's student section. So they're trying to do little things right now, and I think they're being really smart about it. I know there are some fans that are a little bit upset because their seats are going to be moved to accommodate those students being closer, but you want there to be an advantage. You want to have a home court advantage. And I thought it was funny. Josh Brooks, Georgia's athletic director, was saying, when I hired Mike, we were talking and he was like, yeah, I've always liked coaching in Stegman. It's a really comfortable place to play. And Josh is like, yeah, we don't want that. We don't want it to be comfortable. We want to make it, we want to make it challenging. And Mike's been on board. And I think there's been a lot of conversations between Mike, between Josh Brooks, between the other people involved in facilities and just the game day experience. They want to make the most of Stegman. And I think that's going to be a really big step forward. Again, I understand there are fans that are upset because their season tickets are going to be moved. But I think when you look at the bigger picture for Georgia, I think it's going to be an advantage, trying to make it louder, trying to make it tougher to play in Athens.
Well, Mike White may have said that intentionally. That was brilliant on his part to do that, because you move the students there and you take those other season ticket holders and move them around and say, look, we want a home court advantage and we're going to do whatever we've got to do to make that happen. Switching over to football, what's the first day of spring practice? Not that they're not doing mat drills and all that other fun stuff that the players love so much in the off season.
So we don't have a date yet, but it really looks like it's going to be Tuesday, March 14th. And why I say that, there's already a report, I believe it was from NFL Network, that Georgia's pro day is going to be Wednesday, March 15th. And last season, it kind of played out the same way, that spring ball opened on a Tuesday. The very next day was pro day. And that also lines up with, we know for sure Georgia's G-Day spring game is going to be Saturday, April 15th. And if you count the days, that's when it matches up. So we've still got a few weeks, more weeks than Auburn. I think Auburn starts at the end of February. I think they may already be out there running some practices on Valentine's Day, Rob. You may want to check that. But we got a few more weeks, and then Georgia spring's going to open.
Well, not that I'm keeping track, but I am. 28 days from now, they'll start spring practice at Georgia. If you're keeping track, I think that's 672 hours.
There's probably fans that have it up on a wall that's counting down, I have no doubt.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about it. People say, what do y'all do when football's over? I'm like, football really never ends. You have a preseason, competitive season, postseason, and off season. And again, mentally, you do have to pace yourself, but we're really never too far out of it. We had the Super Bowl this past Sunday, and that'll quiet things down, but we got basketball going on as well. But looking at Georgia football, give me your top three. We know who people think will be, but talk about the top three names in the quarterback room. I know them, but everybody else doesn't. And you probably know, I know you do, a lot more than I do.
Yeah, the three to know are Carson Beck, Brock Vandagriff, and Gunnar Stockton. And Carson is the favorite going into this. He was the backup this past season, played sparingly, but looked pretty good when he was out there, made some plays in the opportunities he was given. He's considered the leader in the clubhouse, but I'm of the firm belief it's going to be a three-man race, and whoever wins the job is going to have won the job. Brock Vandagriff, he's a local guy, played at Prince Avenue Christian just outside of Athens. I believe that's Bogart, Georgia. Real tall guy that, from everything I can tell, really cleaned up his mechanics this past season. I think he had improved. That was his redshirt freshman year. I think having a year under his belt did him a load of good and helped him really put himself in a position where it's conceivable, that he could go beat Carson Beck. And then Gunnar Stockton was a true freshman this past year. Really impressive. Heard a lot of good things about him. And, going through that playoff run, I think the thing that stood out was his grit, was his tenacity. I mean, I think that was after the championship game that Kirby Smart talked about. Gunnar went to Kirby and said, I want to take this non-contact jersey off in practice. Like, let me get out there, let them, really get a chance to come after me so they get a good look for the game we're getting ready for. He was a guy that, he was being CJ Stroud when they were getting ready for the Peach Bowl. He was the guy that was running a scout team. So I really expect this to be a three-man race. Again, gun to my head, I would say I expect Carson Beck to win the job, but all three have been really impressive from everything we've heard. It's going to be fascinating to see what we're allowed to watch during spring ball, because, it's been a little bit since Georgia's had a true quarterback battle. It's been situations going into the last few years where, okay, we have a pretty good feel it's going to be Stetson or, before that, JT Daniels. Now it seems very much, up for grabs and for anyone to win. And again, we'll see how much Kirby and the gang lets us see. We might see a whole lot of stretching, but we'll see what we can find out.
Yeah, and you look at Georgia, the running back room is always deep, and the wide receiver group, Pickens is gone, and you what are we going to do? Who are we going to have? Here comes Ladd McConkey. You don't know who I am, but I have a particular set of skills. I will find you, and I will score touchdowns. He is Liam Neeson. I can't get that out of my head. But with Georgia, running backs, wide receivers, all that aside, it's the tight end room. Arik Gilbert never could really get it together. Darnell Washington should be a high pick in the draft. And then you talk, about the man, Brock Bowers out of Napa, California. He's a great one, but who are some of the new names you look to emerge in the tight end room?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. They were so loaded at tight end, and then other than Brock Bowers and Oscar Delp, it kind of resets because Eric Gilbert transfers. He goes to Nebraska. Rylan Goody transfers. He goes to Mississippi State. Brett Seither, he goes with Buster Faulkner to Georgia Tech. So you have, you have Brock coming back who, again, he could win the Mackey Award again. We'll see how it plays out in 2023. But just a proven playmaker, and expect that to be the case again this year. Oscar Delp will be a sophomore who I was really impressed with. He played a good bit, had his first touchdown against South Carolina early in the season, and played some really meaningful snaps in that Peach Bowl when Darnell Washington got hurt. So really like what we saw from him. And then the two new guys coming in are going to be Pierce Sperlin and Lawson Lucky, two 4-star recruits, two guys that have gotten a lot of praise, and guys that I expect to kind of continue that tradition as far as what Georgia's been able to do at the position lately. And now there's still that question mark. They may add another tight end, Deuce Robinson, 5-star, who has yet to commit. There was some smoke that, hey, maybe he'll announce during that February signing period. We got up to that point. He's like, no, I'm going to kind of wait and try to figure things out, because he's also a very good baseball prospect. And I think that's a piece of the puzzle too. But he has said he's going to announce, I think, in early April. And it sounds like Georgia, USC, maybe Texas, Alabama, some of the schools after him. Even if they don't get Deuce, they're in great shape as far as this season and beyond with the tight ends they got. But if they get, I think he's the number 1 tight end. If he's not, he's number 2 in the nation. A very, very good player in Deuce Robinson. It's going to be an embarrassment of riches again at tight end. And I would expect, whether they get him or not, Todd Hartley, the tight ends coach, probably got another raise coming.
Yeah. All right. We got a few more minutes left before we go off. And gotta say, most often we see the face of Christ, and the least among us go out and give with the expectation of getting nothing in return. Don't give to get, give to give. And folks, we live in the greatest country in the history of the world. You get to cheer for your team. In this case, Georgia Bulldogs with Jordan Hill. Jordan, I got to ask you, this crop of high school football players, the class of 24 that's coming up, compared to the most recent class, is it better, the same, or I don't see how possible, but it didn't go backwards, did it?
No, I don't think so. And it's going to be a fascinating year as far as recruiting for Georgia, because there are going to be some very obvious needs. Quarterback, because right now they've only got 3 scholarship quarterbacks, and I sort of expect, at some point one of those guys is probably going to transfer if they don't win the job. And you really need to have those options. You don't want to be in a situation where you're like the San Francisco 49ers in that NFC Championship game. You're looking around asking a running back or something if they can take some snaps. They need bodies at quarterback. And right now they've got a commit in Ryan Puglisi, also going after Dylan Raiola, who is the number 1 quarterback in the nation. So that's going to be something to watch. Defensive end, if you were to kind of be ticky-tack or want to criticize this last class that they signed, which again was the number 2 in the nation, they didn't really sign any defensive ends, 5 technique guys coming off the edge. Now they got some outside linebackers. Maybe they decide they'd rather have them, put a paw on the ground rather than stand up, but they could really use some help there. They could really need to bolster that area of the team a good bit. Other than that, I think those are the big needs they're going to go after. More tight ends. I know they've got a high, I believe he's either a high 4-star or a 5-star in Landon Thomas. They've got a lot of talent. There are some needs, as you would expect, and they're an offensive line as well. But yeah, it's going to be a class worth watching, no doubt.
Well, great stuff as always. Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports Georgia. Tell people how they can follow you and all the great content you put out throughout every day of the week. 24/7 is literally what you do.
Right. Dogs247.com, on Twitter at Jordan Davis Hill, on Twitter at Dogs247. So yeah, basketball's full swing. Football will be here in a few weeks, and there's going to be no shortage of stuff to talk about, and there's going to be no shortage of stuff to write about and podcast, all that fun stuff, Rob. It's a good time of year, no doubt.
Well, hey, it's great. That's what we love. Look forward to having you back on next week. Folks, got a great show tomorrow. I'm going to be talking with Dudley Dawson, Hogville.net, Pat Dye Jr., a couple of more guests we're working on, Until then, have a great day. We are out of here.